So from a point of view of the urban form and the urban design of airport expansion, so any thoughts to sort of throw open to the debate there?
Yeah, so probably for the last 20 to 25 years, Heathrow has had a surface access strategy. It's absolutely critical to the growth and ongoing success of the airport. If people can't get to the airport, they can't fly from the airport. It's pretty critical to our operations. So we've had a clear, sustainable transport plan that's absolutely public transport focused. What Claire was talking about, we have to get people out of their cars to make best use of the capacity that exists. But actually at Heathrow, it's important to remember that there's 76,000 people that work at the airport. So this isn't just about people who are flying to and from the airport. And we have a dedicated Heathrow commuter team that works with people who work for the 80 odd companies that work across the airport to get them out of their cars and onto more sustainable modes. That includes the kind of world's largest single site car share scheme. So there's over 8,000 members of that. A dedicated cycling program and cycle hub where 2,000 members, where you can take your bike for a free service, and also discounted purchase of equipment, and also around improvements to the kind of local transport, because 50% of the people who work at the airport actually live in the surrounding 5 boroughs. So we invest around £2.5 million a year in local bus services. Not just to increase frequency, but to get people to work for the 4 a.m. shift. So around half of the buses now operate 24 hours, and that's working in partnership with organisations like Transport for London, but also to the areas to the west where it's private operators working closely with them to deliver affordable transport for people. So as part of our travel card scheme that we operate, and I have got mine in my pocket, if I can reach it. It's in the other pocket. I'm not going to do that. I'll fall off my chair. But that now allows people who work at the airport, who live in Slough, to travel to the airport for £25 a month, which was a deal that we did with the local operator first around, if we cut the price, we believe that we can double the number of people that are using it, and therefore the revenue benefit is greater for the operator themselves. So I think, for me, urban transport solutions, there's not one solution that delivers what we need in terms of sustainable travel. It's got to be a range of solutions working together. And I think it's also important that we move away from the idea of public transport good, private transport bad. I think we need to move to looking at the graph that Claire shared. Let's make most efficient use of the capacity that we have. See, what forms of transport move people in the most efficient way, making the best use of capacity with the lowest impacts on the transport network and on the local environment.
Will, I've been a member of the ICE's transport panel for the best part of 7 years now, sort of thing, and one of the very first things I was involved in was designing the policy statement on cycling and walking, which was part of the advocacy of the role of cycling in the urban environment and the built environment. We discussed at the last panel meeting, there's kind of a little bit of a backlash now sometimes about the cycling, particularly in London, and also in the city I work in, which is Leeds, in terms of the space that cyclists are taking or seem to be taking. How can we address that, and how can we make sure that cycling does play its role in the urban form going forward?
Yeah, I think the first point to make is that it is about, as Chris says, it's about how can we efficiently move around our towns and cities. In terms of the backlash, I suppose it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation. To encourage people to cycle, we need high quality cycling infrastructure, which needs space to be taken away from other modes of transport. Without that, people won't start cycling, but it is that, we've got to take that space initially to create the environment in which people then feel safe to cycle, which will then see the mode shift coming away from cars onto cycling and other forms of transport.
Thank you. I'm from the London Borough of Sutton. I'm the regeneration manager there. I have a question for the lady over there, for the TfL. We are talking about creating an environment whereby we are looking at a situation where the areas like Isle of Dogs, etc., are increasing farfold in terms of employment. and the employment in the suburbs is not growing at such a fast rate. At the same time, you're also looking at the movement of people from the outer London into inner London because of the growth of the density of employment. But what is happening also is that if you total the number of jobs being created in the outer London, it will outstrip the amount of jobs that are creating in inner London. So, but what is happening is that the transport is radial, in the sense it's from outer London to inner London, but not concentric, and which is creating a huge amount of problem in terms of getting people from jobs from outer London to another place in outer London.
Hi, David Miner for BRA. I'm just quickly looking at the few of the discussions been going on and the slides that you put up by TfL. And before, when we had codes, sustainable homes, and I think that was quite well structured in terms of transport systems and consideration of like developers. And we were talking about housing, which you pointed out also. In what measures are TfL putting, or Mayor of London putting, to ensure that developers are thinking about transport system and what it will cause for housing, and as the gentleman just mentioned about movement from outer London to inner London and rural areas where the local communities are not quite considered as well thoroughly, there's lack of frequency of travel, but what's going to be done to ensure that all these things are put in place when we come to the question of building more housing and all those kind of things?
You banned them from talking about Chicago?
Yeah, that was a mistake.
Okay, now you've got the question of sustainable development in London. Discuss.
Yeah. Okay, so on the first question, yeah, I think that's an issue that we're really aware of. I think there's basically two quite different transport challenges in London at the moment, or emerging. One is to deliver the radial rail capacity that's needed to keep that central London growth happening, and that is about big, frankly, expensive schemes that go inbound to central London, and so they get a lot of focus because they're costly, they're hard to deliver. But at the end of the day, those schemes are about keeping the economy booming, and they're about tackling crowding and unlocking housing. They're not about delivering mode shift from the car, because nobody drives to central. Basically, nobody drives to work in central London. So when we're talking about delivering mode shift from the car, we're talking about all those jobs in places like Sutton, across the whole of outer London, where people do. About 50% of people who work in outer London drive to work. And a lot of those don't have a really good alternative. And it will be about providing more orbital services, rail services where they can be justified, but also better bus services. We're looking at the way that new technology can kind of unlock bus options that haven't been available to us in the past to really improve the sort of accessibility and viability of those jobs in outer London. So yeah, it's definitely, I think, both issues, they're very separate challenges, but they're both very much on our radar. In terms of what we can do to work with developers to deliver sustainable solutions, I mean, I guess the first thing that we're doing is that we're working absolutely hand in hand with the London Plan team to make sure that the kind of requirements in the London Plan really create the conditions for sustainable development in London. It is really challenging because we want the best development. We want sort of high density, accessible, mixed-use development where people can walk, they can cycle. It's got really good bus provision. It's highly accessible to rail, but we also have to deliver, 50% affordable housing. We have to deliver 50,000 homes a year. So it will be about working in tandem with boroughs, with the GLA, and with developers to get that kind of balance of not of getting the best possible but deliverable development that we can. And obviously we have a sort of team who that's their job that they do all the time, working on the transport plans and working with the developers from the very earliest stages of development. But I think it will be very difficult, and I thought that the previous session was fascinating in terms of thinking about how, like, even our home infrastructure, we've talked loads at TfL about like the transport infrastructure and the way technology might change it. I hadn't thought about things like, that you won't need your own garage. I don't know why, but I thought that was really interesting and very difficult for us and for developers, I think. Does anybody else want to?
Claire, can you pass to Jake? I'm going to slightly take Chair's prerogative now. No, so the questions were about London, Jake, but from your side, and I know from working in the north as well, the issue of growth and sustainable growth is one challenging all the cities and all the city regions. Now, drawing on something we said this morning, is that Claire and TfL to some extent have an element of control and integration over a public transport network. Transport for West Midlands doesn't have that yet. The mayoral election might give more control over buses. How important is devolution linked to sustainable growth, do you think?
I think there's several reviews of local plans going on, and Birmingham's just had its development plan approved. So there's a lot of, not necessarily regardless of the structures, there's a lot of close working with land use planning colleagues to promote brownfield sites, promote regeneration and growth. So there's close alignment to our proposals for example, our rail and rapid transit network. But there's also an acknowledgement with Birmingham of some sustainable urban extensions. So there's some housing proposed in the Sutton Coldfield area, and that's very much dependent on getting some sustainable transport infrastructure in place, the developers in place. So recognising, the housing needs, how best we can fit them within the urban area, but if there are requirements, how we can use sustainability principles to make sure from day one there's some really good public transport, walking and cycling in place for those other places.
Can you pass to Will? Just following up on that. Previously, again, cycling was kind of like one of the last things. So if you looked at a transport assessment, it was kind of the last but one chapter before conclusions, sort of thing. Have you seen a change in how cycling can form a part in the early stages of development, and particularly around sort of new inner city urban development as well?
I think yes, there is an increase. Elevation of cycling, if you like, as a mode and its consideration. And I think the local cycling and walking investment infrastructure plans that DFT are sort of going to be publicising very soon, that will play hopefully a big role, providing there's the funding there to make it something that's worth considering.
So Anzio Budu from Samuel L. Foxton Small Consultancy in Leeds. We're going to bring it back a little bit to Leeds and places like Leeds, both in London and in Birmingham and the West Midlands, so including Birmingham's big city plan and the council's ambitions there. There's very much a big, bold focus on we must reduce car travel, we're going to reduce car travel, we're going to take steps to do that. In West Yorkshire, we don't have that. There seems to be very much in the latest transport strategy an admission that car use is going to go up, and they expect it to go up, and they expect almost to not do very much about it apart from tinkering on the edges. So what do you think? I know London's got is quite a special case. I don't know how much insight you have that might help, but certainly in Birmingham and the West Midlands, where do we need to go to put that on the agenda more and actually get policy moving in a direction of reducing car travel and heavy modal shift?
Yes, Avril Rogers. My question is really about what work is being done into shifting, if there is going to be an increase in populations in urban centres, both in the West Midlands and London and all of the urban areas, it is likely with our mode of living and the increase of our shopping and habits in terms of groceries, online deliveries, that those deliveries and the commercial sector is going to be via some sort of transport and increasing the level of road transport, sort of a time that we're driving down car use and into electric car use. And I was wondering, if there was any policies that were looking at that across the nation.
Okay, so that was kind of like the rise of white van man, particularly sort of thing in deliveries, and the question about is all growth good growth, or is some growth particularly bad, and what can we do about that sort of thing? So, who's got the mic? So do you want to start at that end? Start at that end. I'll give you time to think, Will.
I think in the case of the West Midlands, our light rail line, Midland Metro, last year, we extended it from terminating at a suburban rail station in Birmingham City Centre right down the middle of the Corporation Street to New Street. And I think the German transport planners have got a phrase, out of sight, out of mind. Just over a kilometre extension has increased use of the line by about a third. And it's opened up areas just beyond the central area, but there's much more visible. And I think once you can see tangible things it put in place, then you can alter, people want more of it, then it alters the debate about, well, if there's these things being in place, how does that relate to how many cars we can have in traffic jams? So get things in and people can start to see that. And I think our approach for our strategy was 4 tiers and smart mobility. There's a whole host of things going on. There's lots of exciting research, development. And I mean, I think people, the role of hubs to drop off deliveries rather than crowded terrace streets being clogged up with lots of vans. There's things going on, evolving anyway, and it just needs the public sector to have a clear role of where all this fits into to the overall transport system and what role the public sector has got. So I think it's still learning, but there's a lot of activity to try and get that balance of how it fits into an urban transport system.
Will, are we all about Deliveroo lanes next sort of thing?
Yeah, I think cycle logistics has a big part to play. I mean, how many vans drive around our city streets with 1 or 2 packages in that, if we were prepared to wait an extra hour for that package, could be dropped off the hub and taken out on a cargo bike. But it's not. It needs a shift in thinking and a shift in consumer willingness to take slightly higher costs. But why should it cost more? And just sort of a levelling of the playing field to make cycle logistics compete in cities.
Okay. Chris, just picking up the point about good growth and bad growth sort of thing, do you, as an airport, do you kind of get a bit, do you think you're put under even more pressure to be kind of more sustainable than places like Leeds or Manchester where growth is encouraged sort of thing, just because you are the airport and because of the nature of the beast?
Well, I think, as I said before, I think it's for me, it's about outcomes-based transport planning. So one of the reasons that we've set ourselves a target of growing the airport without putting, more traffic on the roads is because the road network's full. There's unlikely to be much more capacity. The outcomes of car travel at the moment are very much around emissions, worsening air quality, carbon emissions, and therefore, those outcomes are unacceptable. So we need to get more people onto public transport. We need to make more efficient use of cars, because I think that's something that we've missed in UK transport policy. Is actually, I know that there's not a strong view on sharing, particularly in the kind of the British psyche, but more and more, as particularly the younger generations in the sharing economy, actually, can we make best use of capacity that's already there? So you just have to look on the motorway network or the roads. Most cars are filled with one person, and how can we make use of that capacity rather than thinking about how much traffic we can get through a road, how many people can we get through a road, and whether that's buses, whether that's shared cars, whether that's kind of, as we move forward into the world of kind of autonomous vehicles, kind of shared mobility, I think becomes an important concept, not just kind of mass transport systems that are important where you've got heavy flows. Just coming back to the freight point, obviously, beyond just the people who work at the airport and the people who are travelling through the airport, Heathrow is the biggest port by value in the UK. It's bigger than Felixstowe and Southampton combined by value. And some of the things that we've been doing, particularly around consolidation of loads. So almost every single delivery that comes to the retail at the airport is delivered to our off-site consolidation centre, and that's consolidated into full loads in larger vehicles, which then deliver to the terminal areas itself, so you don't get that congestion. So I think it's smarter use of the capacity that we have.
Yeah. One of the most interesting points of your presentation was the slide you put up about the factors, about the mode shift. So, and I think this comes back down to the question about Leeds and some of the other cities and the West Midlands as well, is that some of those factors that help reduce car mode share were about stagnation in growth and wage levels, whereas actually that's completely contrary to what the northern cities are doing. Yeah. So it comes back to this thing. So.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's not what anybody wants. I mean, obviously that sort of worked in our favour to get the mode share that we wanted, but that's not the way we'd have wanted to deliver it. So if we want kind of economic growth without car growth, I think this is something that we've thought about a lot, is kind of how can we share what we've done, and London has a lot of advantages. The sort of political structure and the level of control that we've got, our ability to fund ourselves to some extent, and also just frankly the base that we were starting from, is not comparable to other places. But I think there are things that you can learn, and fundamentally, I think that the biggest thing that our experience shows is that at the end of the day, it's about what is the best choice for people themselves, because transport planners put a lot of effort into persuading people to change, but people are not going to change if the other choice is worse than this choice. And it doesn't matter if we say, oh well, it's kind of greener or it's better or whatever. It's got to be better for you on a day-to-day basis, and it being healthier just doesn't feel that important at kind of 8 a.m. when you've got to all get out the house and it's raining. So fundamentally, we need to build new places and to some extent kind of retrofit our cities and towns so that you can live easily without relying on a car. You need to have things locally, and you need to have good ways of getting about that are affordable, that are appealing, and that are reliable and quick. And we can't really expect significant mode shift until that's what we can offer. And even in outer London, for a lot of people, for a lot of their journeys, we don't offer that. So it's about density, and it's about accessibility, and it's about comparable quality, and it's also about looking at the way that looking at the car and how appealing that is, and what can we do about that. In terms of the van question, that's something we are really interested in. We're projecting nearly 40% increase in white van traffic over that 25-year period. It's a really significant contributor to the growth in congestion, and it's very worrying. We've seen enormous growth in van traffic over the last few years as well. Interestingly, we're starting to see trip rates are falling in London, which I just don't think has been seen in Britain for sort of 100 years. So, and particularly trips for shopping purposes are falling. So you are starting to see potentially that kind of switch from people making those private trips. Now in London, a big issue is that, so I might have popped out to the shop to get something. I might have done that on foot. Maybe I did it in my car, but also a lot of shopping trips in London are a lot done on foot and by bus. And now what I might be doing is ordering it to my central London office and getting it by van. that is a disaster. The last thing we want is things that were being done by a sustainable mode in residential areas being done in the peak in central London by road traffic. So we're looking at that very intensively, and we've got a lot of policy under development to tackle exactly that problem, which will be things like consolidation, thinking radically about cycling, all sorts of things.
Hi, Neil O'Hay, commuter from Brighton. I'm going to challenge Claire, but it's a question for the group. It seems to be taking an awful long time to turn into a kind of green transport, and a lot of us will be dead by the time probably a lot of it is delivered. So specifically, Claire put up some numbers on cycling, and I think the modal shift for 2040 was 6% on cycling, which is quite frankly pathetic. Can we be slightly more revolutionary? I mean, you have car-free days in Mexico City, which is dominated by the car. I think Paris did you can only come in with an odd-shaped number plate on certain days. I think people don't like revolution, but it's very good at delivering results very quickly, and people adapt very quickly, and businesses adapt very quickly. So can we be more revolutionary? Question?
And I think the short answer might be yes from the audience, but I'll let Claire think about that in a bit, and the gentleman at the...
Hello, my name is Martin Popham, Kenning Group. My particular interest is in the fuel mix and air quality with transport, because there's a lot of talk. I know it doesn't cut down journeys, but if electric vehicles and hydrogen are going to take up the slack or are going to be used, there's going to have to be a big infrastructure and a step change for taxis, buses, and other things. And is it part of the plan? Because without the infrastructure, I can't see that ever happening as it is in other parts of the world.
Okay. So I guess those two are slightly linked, because the will or the technology exists. Are we radical enough to make that leap?
Shall I start? So I think that our mayor and deputy mayor for transport would agree with you, and those forecasts are the reference case forecasts, and I think you'll be happy to see much more radical expectations when we publish this strategy. We are certainly aiming for something much more ambitious in the future, and we're really, our position is going to be that we want to be up there with the best world cities in terms of our mode share. I think we will be aiming to be a lot more radical than that. It is difficult. It's difficult to take people with you. I mean, Will talked about the issues around, you do with something like cycling, you do have to take that risk of putting in a lot of stuff first when the demand isn't quite there. And so, something goes in, it's not full, the road next to it is full, but that's because you've got to build that up over time. So I think it will be challenging to do that, but it is essential. On the electric vehicle side, I think our position on that is very much that by delivering as much mode shift away from the car as we can, we make some of these new technologies more viable. It's easier to kind of green a fleet that's a smaller fleet, and to put that sort of focus in. So we're very much seeing those things as going hand in hand. We know that we need the fleet to go electric. We can't deliver our carbon goals or the air quality that we need for good health in London without them. So I'm not really, there is a sort of environment strategy being developed at the same time. I'm not really, I've been involved in the transporty bits, but there are lots of discussions going on about what the necessary supporting infrastructure will be. I'm not at all an expert in that, but certainly the scale of ambition in London is very much for a sort of a zero carbon fleet by 2050, so that is what that means.
I think there's a couple of points on the kind of the bold issue. Yes, we have to be bold. Yes, we have to be innovative. And at Heathrow, we've just launched our sustainability strategy that is certainly bold and out there as kind of airports go. But you always have to be very careful when you're dealing with bold things and doing things to people, that often in transport there's several unintended consequences that come as a result. And so sort of well-intentioned transport planners with bold ideas, and people will find their way round things and create more problems than there were in the first place. So I think you have to be a bit careful. On the alternative fuels piece, Absolutely. We've got a kind of a multi-billion pound investment program around electric charging points at the airport to take kind of airside vehicles, sort of electrify that fleet by 2020. We've got a hydrogen fueling station at the airport, and we continue to invest as well in that technology to support the arrival of the ULEZ in kind of 2018. So there's a lot being done, but we need to do more to give the kind of fleet operators, who are actually the main owners now of vehicles effectively, that confidence to invest in the new infrastructure and the new vehicle technology to make the change, because it's not going to be lots of private individuals making that change. It's actually the things like the private hire fleet, which continues to grow, the taxi fleet, the bus and coach operators, the freight operators that are going to be absolutely critical to delivering that change.
The boldness, yes, absolutely, and it's about political leadership, political will, and long-term political leadership, and that. But it's, I was reading about Nottingham the other day, where they've had a workplace parking levy for quite a while, and that's actually resulted in reduced traffic into the city. So it is possible to put these measures in place, which might seem unpopular, but can have benefits.
I think with boldness, I think there's 5 points for a world-class transport system, and the top one is effective governance. And I think in the West Midlands, on the 4th of May, we'll have an elected metropolitan mayor, and so that brings possibilities of sort of new ideas and with a mandate. So we'll see how that goes on in relation to that. With the sort of clean air issues related to emissions, there's work to be done with DEFRA, with clean air zones designation, I think up and running by 2020. And also in the Midlands, working with our research academic institutions and our vehicle manufacturers to translate their work to applied work in the West Midlands and other urban areas.
Thanks, Jake. I think on the Nottingham issue, well, that's quite an interesting one to pick up, because again, I think, and a bit like the congestion charge in London when it arrived, is that there was a very direct link in Nottingham's workplace parking levy, to the tram system. So I think you were saying, this is what you're paying, but this is what you are getting instead. And again, way back when the congestion charge was introduced, it was like, congestion charge, but you've got a better bus service. Making that link, I think, often gets over that boldness. And what do you got again?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I actually live in Nottingham, I experience it myself, and it's really impressive, the level of investment in the trams, the bus network as well, and also a lot of cycling infrastructure going in there, and you can feel that it is becoming a different sort of city, a sustainable city. And I think it is really important to link those things together, that you're paying for something, but the alternative will be there and it will be appealing. I mean, the thing with the tram network is that it's lovely.
Yeah.
And I just spent the whole time going around thinking, God, we should have this more in London.
And I think that comes back to what you were saying at the start, is that the mayoral strategy states these sort of things. And I think, as Jake was saying, and picking up the theme this morning on devolution, is that there'll be another 5 areas of the country in 6 or 8 weeks' time that will have that opportunity for a person to make a very clear statement about what that could be. Thank you.